Okay everyone, so we've decided to go with the traditional Xbox color of buttons on here. Originally we had 4 white, 4 black, but now that we painted this black, we didn't think they'd stand out very well. So I think that looks good. We're going to do the same configuration on the bottom as we did on the top. Now I'll show you these buttons when you're putting them in. I'm actually going to turn this over to make it a little easier for me for height. And we'll bring the camera in closer. Okay, now depending on where you mount your circuit boards and how much distance you have between everything, the wires they give you are quite short to reach from the micro switches on these to your circuit board. So if you make sure you've got these all turned so that the wire connection points on the micro switches are already facing towards your board, it'll help you out with the length of wires that they give you. Now, one of the other things that I'm doing on these switches, if you see what the switch looks like, let's see if I can get some better lighting here from this other side. Okay, notice on the switches, here's one up close, there's a short arm with a plastic nub on it here, and a longer arm with a plastic nub on it. So if you look at those ones, when you put the micro switch on, there's the little button that's the actual switch, which has to obviously go towards the button side that you're going to be pushing. If you started on the one that has the short arm with the nub first and put that on, then when you swing it around, it's much easier to pry that longer one out just a little bit to allow you to put that switch in there. And it swings up, pops right into place. Okay, so that's those. We got 4 on the bottom to do, and we also have the single player, 2-player buttons, and a start button to do.
Nut first.
Okay, for our joystick, the knob just threads off the top of the shaft. And we've already pre-drilled some holes. Make sure your screws are not going to be too long that they're going to go right through your wood. Okay, now we have our 2 circuit boards to mount in here. So we've positioned these because there's a large cable that has to plug into this end. So we've positioned it so there's lots of room for that cable and it's not going to try and kink or bend into this stuff. Something else you'll want to pay attention to on these, you'll have all of the copper points sticking up on the back. So when you screw that on, it's not going to sit completely flat. So when you tighten those screws up in the corners, don't over tighten them and break the corners of the boards off. While I'm assembling the controls and the circuit boards in here, my son's going to take over the video and he'll show you how to download the operating system onto the micro SD card that we'll later need in the RetroPie.
Okay, well, my dad's doing that. I will show you the software portion of the arcade machine. Now, you will need the Raspberry Pi, a micro SD card, a micro SD card reader, and a USB stick. Depending on which Raspberry Pi you get, some of them come with the SD card and the SD card reader. Mine did. The SD card, you'll be putting the SD card into the Raspberry Pi later. First things first, you need to download the Raspberry Pi OS Imager on your computer. This also is for, yes, you can download it for Mac OS or Ubuntu. I will be putting this link in the description below for you guys so you guys can download it too. So you're just going to run the run the exe and go through the installation instructions. Click Run the Raspberry Pi Imager. Okay, we do not need this anymore. So now all we do is we plug in our micro SD card with whatever reader we're using. Okay, so as you can see, it's appeared on my screen. It says volume F, and it's completely empty. So now what we're going to do is we're going to click the Choose the Operating System. Now, you guys need to pick the one that is for your Raspberry Pi. I have a Raspberry Pi 4, and I am installing RetroPie, so we are going to Emulation and Game OS, RetroPie, and the latest version for the RetroPie 4, which is right here, RPI 4400, that's the model, and that's the RetroPie version. So you click this, and you choose what storage device it is. Mine is going to be this one here, which is the 65 gigabyte one. And then you just click Write. And then, yes, all existing data will be erased. Continue. Now, while this waits, I want to show you something else that you guys have to do. This is a little less important. This is for adding games to it. Now, I'm not going to explain how to get games because there's lots of instructions online, and all you got to do is just Google how to put games on your RetroPie. So, what you need to do is you need to have a rather small USB stick handy. Some of these games don't really require much space. Plug it in to your computer, which I'm doing now. You have to make sure it's empty. It's just plugging in itself now. So here it is. It's empty. I have already formatted this, but I will show you. You have to format it to a certain file format. So yes, it has to be FAT32. And I will show you how to do that now. So what you need to do is, this is also the same on any Windows version. Well, up to Windows 7. If you're using anything below Windows 7, get a new computer. Anyway, so all you need to do is type in disk. I type in disk management, and it says create and format hard disk partitions. You click this, and it opens. And this will show you all your drives. Takes a second sometimes. So this will show you all your drives and partitions on your computer. So right now, as you can see, I have a little bit of space myself. These are some portable hard drives I have. Now, if you scroll down here, you'll see my, here's my very small, 4 gig USB drive. Now, what you want to do is you will want to click on this and click Format. And it'll ask you what file system you want, and you want to make sure it's FAT32, not NTFS. This is because it works better that way, and it's completely compatible. There's no issues with it. So you click OK, and then formatting this will erase all data, and then just click OK. So give it a second, it'll format. There, and it's done. You can't really see much of a change because, there's nothing on it, or it doesn't have a different name or anything. But yeah, so it's been formatted to FAT32. And what you'll need to do after all this is done, I will show you in a bit, but it's very simple. You plug in the USB stick and you wait, and you have to come back and plug it into a computer to make sure it worked. And I'll explain all that very soon. The next part is the wiring for the arcade buttons in the machine itself. So we're going to go back upstairs and we're going to continue.
Okay, so the sharp wires that I was talking about, they're 6 or 7 inches long. It doesn't matter what side you use, this longer white strip here or the shorter white strip, not the red ones. So if you're going to put, for example, yellow in the end here, when you do the yellow one down here, you want to make sure it's in the same spot. So when you're wiring up your configurations for your buttons, whatever you say the yellow button is going to do, it's going to do the same no matter which set of buttons you're using. So we've set this up with one joystick in the middle and a set of buttons on the left and a set on the right, and we're configuring them the same. So if you're a left-handed person or a right-handed person, it's more comfortable for you to use. So once you've got all of those plugged in, and there's a ribbon cable also. The ribbon cable is for the joystick. And it doesn't matter which board you plug it into, it goes into the bigger one at the end. So we'll finish wiring this up. I can show you the knob that I was talking about for the joystick. The only other thing we've done on this, we have a key lock that we've decided that we need to put in here. And that's the location we've chosen for it. Now, the only reason we needed that, I did not think it'd be an issue when we designed this. The way we've put this on a bit of an angle where your controls are going to be. But it turns out that when you're using it, it wants to start sliding down. So this key lock, it just has a pawl on it that when you turn it, it's going to come up into the frame on the machine, and it's going to stop this from wanting to slide out. That's the only reason we put that in there. So we're going to finish doing the wiring on all of this, and then I think it's time to move this machine downstairs in its location and finish the assembly down there. I should point out, when I was talking about making sure these buttons and these buttons are plugged into the same ports on the boards, that is true for those two sets of switches, not for these. You don't want these single player, two player button, you don't want them plugged into the same place, or when you're programming that slot on the board, it's going to make both buttons do the same thing. So those ones you do want in different positions for programming purposes. The black one we put in the middle is going to be the hotkey or the start-stop button for the game. Doesn't matter where you put that one. We had a set of old computer speakers. We just took them apart. It still has the volume button and stuff on here yet, but we're just going to let that kind of float inside. These grills that came off of the speakers, they just had two metal fingers, I guess you'd say, on it that pushed onto the plastic speaker housing. We just drilled holes in the wood, and we're just using the same method to attach them over the speakers. There, our speakers are mounted. Okay, so this little guy is the Raspberry Pi that we purchased. So when you get this in the box, you need to put these heat sinks. They're just a stick-on. You'll need to put the heat sinks on the board. The board just snaps into the case. The fan, there's just a positive and negative lead on it. And the pins, if I can get in close enough. So these pins here, if you look at the right-hand row are odd numbers, and the outside row are even numbers. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So if you want the fan running on low speed, your live is going to go on the number 1. The ground will always be on number 6. If you want the fan running on high speed, your live is going to go on the number 2 pin. So that's going to run this fan on high speed. And that's it. It snaps together. This screw, we've drilled a hole through the cabinet that we can put this screw through and screw this into the cabinet. The other circuit board you saw us putting over the switches are all going to plug into that end of it, and the power and everything else that it needs. The micro SD card. This is a micro SD card reader. It comes with the kit. So your micro SD card, you'll use that in your computer to download the operating system, the software. And then, so then you've got your little micro SD card, and there's a slot in the end of this guy. This is hard to do holding on the phone. There. So that's all there is to that part of it. Okay, so looking at things from another angle. So there's our Raspberry Pi again. That was the unit you saw me put the fan in. So the two cables here, I don't know how well that'll show up. You can see where those two cables are plugged in. These are the ones that are going to go to those two circuit boards that we put on the bottom of our control panel. This one we have here is coming for our speakers. This one here that's plugged in. Now there's two ports here, if I can get close enough. There's two here that this will actually plug into. They're both the same. You want it in the one that is closest to the power supply. This one will register as a second display if you plug it in there. So you're using one display, you want to plug it in the one closest to the power. Obviously that's the power for the Raspberry Pi. Now we'll move around the back. So there's our Raspberry Pi again. Now there's an on-off switch on it. We'll figure out which way's on and we'll leave it permanently turned on so that it'll operate from our power switch we're putting on the back. The monitor, now this was an older one, so it has VGA connections on it. And all the Raspberry Pi stuff is newer, so it comes with an HDMI cable. So this is an adapter. There's where your HDMI is going to plug in. Now some monitors may require a power source also. This one doesn't. So you'll have to watch that when you get your adapter. It may have to have another power lead on here also for that. This power cord that we have here is going to plug into our LED lights, and the end for that's not in yet. It's going to be on the back side of our marquee, which will be across that opening up there. So we're just leaving it sit for a moment. So a wire receptacle in underneath this shelf here. So our power bar is plugged in, and it gave us another socket that we needed to plug in one of the bigger square adapters here because they wouldn't all fit in this power bar that we have. So we've got our monitor, our LED lights, Raspberry Pi, speakers, and of course the power bar itself. Now this is our switch that we're wiring up for the main on-off switch for the machine. So for that, you can pause your video here if you need to and take a snapshot of how we wired this up. This light, this switch does light up. To do that, you're running some jumper wires. So there's a jumper wire here from that terminal to that one, and then another jumper wire from this terminal to one over here. And you've got your standard black, white, and your ground from any household wiring type circuit. So I'll leave that there for a minute so you can see where they go. Okay, as for the receptacle itself, there's a video I did 7 or 8 months back called Electrical. You can see if you need to know how to just wire up a receptacle. You can find it on that other video. So we've also got one of these old flimsy flexible keyboards. We're just going to leave that laying in here. So I don't know, if you had any games that required a keyboard to play them, it's here. If there was some configuration issues with your buttons, you needed to change them or reset them, you've got a keyboard here to be able to do that. And it also plugs into that Raspberry Pi, but it plugs in this top right-hand corner of it over here. That's where the keyboard plugs in. And we're just...
Moment of truth. Keyboard. As soon as you start this machine, you'll come up with a controller configuration, which I will show you. So when you initially boot this thing up after you installed the software, you're going to come up with it's going to be black around the edges, but you're initially going to come up with this. And this is when you push your buttons to assign buttons, basically. Now, you want to do this first with a keyboard, just in case you run into the problem where a button stops working, or you need to do extra configuration with something such as an operating system update, or adding another emulator for another game or something. So I'm just going to do my keyboard and do some button assignments here. So for my up, down, left, and right, I'll use my arrow pad. So up, down, left, right. For my start and select, I like to use O and P. So for my A, B, and X and Y, I'm just going to use I, J, K, and L. It's going to be L, K, J, I. These are for controllers if you wanted to add controller games such as Xbox or PlayStation or Nintendo or something. So we don't actually need these currently. So you just hold the skip. So I'm going to hold any button to skip these. All of these can be skipped up into the hotkey button, I do believe. Okay, and then I'm just going to press Q for the hotkey and press OK. And it might take a minute here. There. So now if I back out of this, so now you can see this works now. Now just to configure the controllers. So we're going to go, wrong one. Back to the configure input. Are you sure you want to configure input? Yes. So it says hold a button on your device to configure it. So I'm going to hold. I don't know, my buttons are working.
Yeah, we had this issue before. So apparently I was wrong earlier. I said it didn't matter which white strip that you used. Apparently it does. None of the buttons were working and they were plugged into the short white strip. We've moved them over to the long strip. Again, keeping the same, the green is in the end here, so the green is in the end over here. Keeping them in the same order. This is our single player button, our start button, and our 2-player button. And the 2-player button was the only one willing to take a configuration command. And it was plugged into this, what we've called the first circuit board. So when you're going through programming, it has a first set of controls and a second set of controls. Because it's the only one working in the first set of controls, we think the other 2 switches needed to be plugged in over here also. And to do that, we just had to relocate this circuit board a little bit because, as I said before, those wires are so short. Think this is going to solve our problem? Let's find out.
So now that we've moved some stuff, we will have to reconfigure the button. These are the Xbox colors on the Xbox controller, so A, B, X, and Y, and that's how we'll be setting it up. All right, so you know the drill, folks. Up, down, left, right, start, select, A, B, X, Y. It's actually faster to skip this with your arrow keys on your keyboard. Much faster. And hotkey enable. Okay, and then we're going to do that again for controller 2. Come on, there we go. Yep, alright. Okay, and then we're going to skip all that again. Do our A, B, X, and Y.
Okay.
Okay, and that's pretty much done. So we're just going to press A, OK. And ignore that. It's just saying that there's no hotkey button. And click OK. Back. Now everything should work. Now to put this to the final test, I'm going to put the keyboard away. And we are going to try to play a quick game. Just leave that like that. Should work. Okay. Keys locked in place so it don't move. Alright, let's give it a try. We'll play Pac-Man, it's pretty common. Give it a second to load. Okay, this is its normal loading. It's working.
So there's our backlit LEDs coming off of it. And at the very top, you can see some lights across the front there. So those are in the marquee sign where Pac-Man's eating the dots. So that's it. The machine is built. All right, so there you have it. Our arcade machine build is complete. Hope you found some useful information in this. We'll put some links down in the description for the Raspberry Pi and RetroPie. And hopefully that'll get you through. Thank you very much for watching.